What's up, guys? Welcome back to my AP Literature video series. Please forgive my voice, I'm recovering from a cold. Today I'm going to show you how to annotate an actual prose passage from a past AP Literature exam and how to write an essay based on that step by step. So let's get started. The prose essay asks you to read a literary passage from any piece of literature, whether that's a short story or a novel, and analyze that passage based on a specific prompt. You're given roughly 40 minutes to complete this essay. I suggest that you annotate the passage for 3 to 5 minutes and plan your essay for 2 to 5 minutes, but that breakdown of time is really up to you. So here is an actual prompt from a past AP exam. In this excerpt from Thomas Hardy's The Mayor of Casterbridge, Michael Henchard and his daughter, Elizabeth Jane, are reunited after years of estrangement. During this separation, Henchard has risen from poor seasonal farm worker to wealthy mayor of a small country town, while Elizabeth has supported herself by waiting on tables at a tavern. Read the passage carefully, paying particular attention to tone, word choice, and selection of detail. Compose a well-written essay in which you analyze Hardy's portrayal of the complex relationship between the two characters. So, we see here that the College Board is actually giving us some really helpful hints. So they're telling us that we can focus on specific devices in our essay, including tone, or the author's attitude towards the subject, word choice, which is basically the types of just words that the author selects to use in the passage, and selection of detail. So selection of detail, you might be wondering what exactly that is, but that's just a kind of general term for the author's choice to include specific images, words, or events to contribute to the larger story or impression. I would say I usually stay away from using selection of detail when I'm analyzing a passage, but if you're ever in a pinch and you don't really know what kind of device to analyze, you can definitely use this. And remember, although the College Board tells you to keep these three in mind, you are not limited to these three devices, and you don't even really have to mention them specifically in your essay. So we'll be going over that a little bit later, but you can actually analyze other literary devices, a range of them, to show your expertise in literary analysis. And remember, when you're writing the essay, you really have to tie everything back to Hardy's portrayal of the complex relationship between these two characters, Michael Henchard and his daughter, Elizabeth Jane. You should always read this introduction and the prompt really thoroughly. I would never skip it because you can actually find out a lot about the passage just by reading the prompt. So I've highlighted a couple of important phrases in here, and we can find some really significant themes before even reading the passage. So for example, we see that there's going to be a major switch in social classes because Henchard has risen from a poor farm worker to a wealthy mayor. We know that there's going to be a struggle between both characters to reconcile, since Elizabeth Jane and her father have been separated for a really long time. And we know that this is going to be a struggle between two clashing identities. So we can possibly focus on these three themes or subjects while analyzing the passage and possibly include them in our thesis. So that's why it's really important to read the prompt beforehand, because we have some clues, we have some specific elements to focus on before we even start annotating. Here is the full prose passage. Please pause this video and read it over. You can even annotate it yourself and see what you come up with before we annotate it together. So I assume that you've paused this video. I've just taken away that last chunk of text to save some space on the screen. So let's get started with our annotations. We see that Hardy uses a really interesting word choice to indicate that social class is a really important subject in this passage. So for example, he points out Elizabeth's occasional pretty and picturesque use of dialect words, those terrible marks of the beast, to the truly genteel. So we know that the word choice, marks of the beast, is a specific exaggeration of her uncouth behavior. And we know that her use of dialect words or colloquial words is going to be an important aspect of this passage. And if we keep reading, we see that her father, Henchard, says, "Bide where you be. Good God, are you only fit to carry wash to a pig trough, that ye use such words as those?" And so Hardy is using dialogue to show Henchard's mockery or derision of Elizabeth Jane with a sarcastic tone that scorns the lower class. So we've analyzed tone in just this small little piece of dialogue here. And if we continue, this is my favorite part of the passage, where we see a direct contrast or juxtaposition between colloquialism and proper words. So for example, we see that Elizabeth Jane has learned to say, instead of Fay, she says the word succeed. Instead of Dumbledores, she says humblebees, which is just another word for bumblebees. And we see here that this is a contrast between the literal description of what she's feeling and the proper diction that she's supposed to use. And we see that the upper classes are actually using euphemistic words to describe their own feelings or actions. So they're understating what they're going through. For example, when Elizabeth Jane is not sleeping well during the night, she has to say that she suffered from indigestion, which is an understating, euphemistic way to put it. Now let's focus on the part of the passage that says, "She started the pen in an elephantine march across the sheet. It was a splendid, round, bold hand of her own conception," and it goes on. But this is some really significant imagery comparing Elizabeth Jane's handwriting to an elephant, which is really clumsy, large, and awkward looking. And this image of an elephant is really evocative of those specific descriptions. And the next part shows that Henchard himself believes that bristling characters were as innate and inseparable a part of refined womanhood as sex itself. So this demonstrates the fact that elegant handwriting, according to Henchard and his counterparts, is a symbol of femininity. And thus we can deduce by Elizabeth's clumsy and awkward handwriting and her inability to use proper diction, we can see that she really doesn't fulfill Henchard's standards of femininity. She doesn't fulfill the image of what he believes a woman should be. And in this last part, Elizabeth Jane is really willing to saddle herself with manual labors. This is a comparison to an animal who's saddled with all of these tasks, who's really overburdening herself, which is, again, distasteful to her father. Now that we're done annotating our passage, it's time to craft the thesis. So I have the prompt right up here, and a sample thesis that we could use is: Hardy uses colloquialism and symbolism to depict Henchard's condescending attitude towards his daughter and Elizabeth Jane's inability to fulfill her father's standards of femininity. So I've chosen to focus on colloquialism and symbolism. Note how I didn't use the words tone or word choice, because I actually wanted to use devices that weren't mentioned in the prompt. And we're going to analyze tone and word choice within these devices itself to continue with answering the prompt itself. But also, we are going to be writing a 4-paragraph essay according to this thesis. So one body paragraph will focus on colloquialism, and the second body paragraph will be about symbolism. And note how I've split up my thesis into these 2 parts. We see Henchard's view of Elizabeth Jane when I said Henchard's condescending attitude towards his daughter, and we also see Elizabeth Jane's view of Henchard in the part that says Elizabeth Jane's inability to fulfill her father's standards of femininity. So by splitting up our thesis into these two parts, we can see the dual aspects of their relationship and really delve into how complex it is. One thing you should definitely avoid when writing a thesis is writing something like this. Hardy uses colloquialism and symbolism to portray the complex relationship between the two characters. So note how this underlined part is identical to the part stated by the prompt. So we want to really not repeat anything from the prompt at all. We want to use as much of our own words as possible to show our own independent thoughts. And by saying just the complex relationship between the characters, we're actually just restating what the prompt is saying. We're not actually making a commentary on why this relationship is complex or what specific aspects of that relationship we want to focus on. For the breakdown of the essay, we have our introductory paragraph. This is not like a typical literary analysis essay, so the introduction will be really short. It can be anywhere from 2 to 3 sentences, and we'll just start right away with providing context on the story. Make sure not to retell the plot because obviously the AP reader has read this story and they may even know more about it than we do. So, for example, you can start out your essay by talking about how the separation between these two characters has led to a shift in social class and values. And the last statement of your intro will be your thesis statement. Your first body paragraph, in that paragraph, your topic sentence can talk about how Hardy uses a contrast between slang words and proper euphemisms to demonstrate how Elizabeth Jane is really not fulfilling Henchard's image of what a perfect upper-class woman should be. And we can analyze throughout this body paragraph how Henchard ironically looks down upon his daughter because he has these really unrealistic expectations of her, even though he himself was also a farm worker, a poor farm worker in the past. In your body paragraph, definitely draw from the text. Use quotes from the passage to back up whatever you're saying and to analyze bits from the passage, but make sure not to use really long quotes. If you can, just use a few words or phrases, because the more you use your own words, the better it is for your essay as a whole. And for your second body paragraph, we can talk about how handwriting symbolizes womanhood and gentility. So you can specifically analyze the use of the word elephantine to show how Elizabeth Jane doesn't reflect the image suited to Henchard's position, and also analyze the tone that Hardy uses to ridicule Elizabeth Jane. Your conclusion, again, like the intro, can be really short, anywhere from 2 to 4 sentences. You'll restate the thesis, which doesn't mean state the thesis word for word, but to just basically reiterate the concepts mentioned in the thesis. And remember to end with an insightful statement that connects back to the prompt and essential themes that you've expanded on throughout your essay. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe and tap the bell to receive notifications whenever I make a new video. Comment below and tell me what other writing topics you'd like me to cover in future videos, and also comment with your own thesis statements for this passage. I will see you next time.